This is my area. I guess you'd call it my patch. This is Peckham in South East London, where I grew up.
We gotta work harder for each other, for the future.
And here is where I went to school. I had a good start in life. I got a good education. And then, by trial and error, yes, I made some mistakes, but I made my way into the world of business. I want every young person to recognise their business skills early. And here's why. It's a great chance to take control of your life, to determine your own direction, and more than that, it's a great opportunity for social mobility, to improve your chances in life overall. Now, geographically, Peckham is not that far from the City of London, and nor should it be in terms of opportunity for our young people. They should be inspired and passionate about doing business in the UK, whether that's in manufacturing, retail, banking, or technology. We need them to grow successful and profitable British businesses. Why? Because enterprise and competition are the only way we're going to get Britain back on its feet. You know, we love it when small businesses like this are doing well, but I think politicians need to celebrate when businesses small and large are making big profits. And the bigger the profits, the more we should cheer, because it's creating jobs, it's putting money in people's pockets, and it's creating a greater level of social mobility for the next generation. I'm on side of business because I come from a tough background in Peckham. I made the journey from social housing by starting my business and working hard. So I know that business is a force for good. And now I'm in Westminster, for the sake of today's disadvantaged kids, I want everyone else to celebrate what business can bring to the country.
There was an amazing shot there, wasn't there, at the end of that piece? Adam Afriyie is here now. Should education really be about learning about business skills?
I don't think in the core education curriculum, no, but organisations like Young Enterprise, what they do is they allow school children to set up a business, a real business, and to work out, are they attuned to being the entrepreneur who leads it, or do they feel better being somebody who supports it, being the accountant or the product designer? And I think it's really important, because one of the great ways you can get control of your life is actually if you do start a business and then you make your own way in life, and the result of that, if you do well, is that their profits are made and that you decorate your house and employ people and that you invest more in that business. And actually, governments don't bring the economic growth. It's actually businesses that bring economic growth.
How widespread is young enterprise in schools? I mean, is it something, do you think, that should be brought in, particularly perhaps for A levels, that people should have that experience in every state school?
I think it's absolutely essential that everyone recognises the benefits that business can bring. And Young Enterprise are a great organisation, and they are, you know, they're spread across the country. They're a charitable organisation too, so it's not costing the government any money. And I think the wider they can promote their services, then the better.
Right. You say in the film, the bigger the profits, the more we should cheer.
I knew that made you cringe.
Yeah. No, it didn't make me cringe. All it made me think of is the banking crisis. But people will just say, we allowed institutions to get bigger and bigger and make more and more profits, and look where we ended up.
Yeah, but what underpins this is actually that you have to have a competitive market where you've got lots of businesses competing with each other in order to make a profit. And that way you're inventive, you're creative,
sure,
you find better ways of doing it.
Why big profit? Why does it have to be bigger and bigger all the time? Why can't it just be making some money and being a success?
Oh, no. The bigger the profits, the more we should cheer, because the bigger the profits, the more tax that goes to the exchequer, the more money that's reinvested in businesses to create more jobs.
If businesses pay, of course.
And the greater the levels of social mobility as people, because you can't discriminate. If you're a business that's got a very busy job market, you can't discriminate on the grounds of background or heritage. You can only take the best person for the job. So it's great for social mobility, and it's great for the exchequer too in the country.
The exact opposite, David Blunkett, I put to you, that Ed Miliband has been talking about when he talks about his predators rather than producers and irresponsible capitalism.
Well, there are two ends, aren't there? I mean, who could be against profit? You've got a business if you don't make a profit. If you don't make a profit, you won't pay tax, although it is the small businesses that seem to be paying the tax. They end up paying corporation tax, and of course Amazon and now we discover Apple and all these others don't. So getting that right is important. I think you'd be surprised about this when Adam may scowl, but Adam and Gordon Brown have quite a lot in common, because Gordon Brown was really enthusiastic about young enterprise and about getting enterprise into the curriculum, and I am. And I think it's really important, you know, when they give youngsters a tenner and say, see what you can make,
yes.
you know, on that. I think it's a really interesting idea. But in the end, of course, big profits depend on who you're making it from and how you're making it. And if it's moral and ethical and we have some control over it, then it's a good thing.
But
if
doesn't
it
that
isn't,
limit
it's
the profit? Doesn't that limit the profit?
Well, a bit. Of course it limits it to manageable proportions. And Adam knows that the difficulty with using the tax system in this area is that business go on strike. I remember writing a paper on this when I was at university, God knows how long ago, so nothing changes.
But David, isn't this the nub of it? Is that quite often, look, the politicians need to do a mea culpa here. They need to say that, look, if there are tax loopholes, if people aren't paying the right amount of tax legally, that it's for politicians and governments to put that right, rather than to create this kind of narrative that somehow making a profit in a larger business is wrong.
We are the people who should be speaking on behalf of, working and acting on behalf of the public to avoid exploitation. I accept that entirely. Incidentally, money management and dealing with these matters has been agreed as part of the new citizenship curriculum.
Yes.
We now need to encourage economics and enterprise, this whole creativity agenda in schools.
But Adam's point, David Blunkett, that actually perhaps politicians haven't cheered enough about big business and big profit. Do you think that's the case?
Well, we got into an era where my own leadership were criticised very heavily, were they not? As Tony Blair would say.
Yes.
And Peter Mandelson and the like. So we revolve, don't we, from one extreme to the other. The pendulum swings. Adam's done very well from his background. People do well in all sorts of other ways than making big profit, but there's nothing wrong with profit so long as it's made ethically and that we get our hands on a bit of it.
Let's talk about size, though, because big profits, big organisations, coming back to the financial crisis, that was one of the biggest problems. They were too big. They were too big to fail. And the Professor of Business and Risk, Nassim Taleb, who I had the pleasure of meeting, talked a lot about big corporations being inherently unstable, that actually small is beautiful, he used to say.
That's Francis Schaeffer. Yeah, I think there is something in that, but what we must not forget is you can have big businesses in competition with each other. The failure of the banking system was a systemic thing where there wasn't enough competition in the market, and again, you know, I'm against any sort of kind of bullying or overpowering kind of force in society, and there's nothing worse than actually a public monopoly than a private monopoly. So I think the challenge is not how big a business is, but whether or not the market is in competition and whether or not innovation is taking place. But I think the overall point I wanted to make from the film that I've made is actually that this is about, it's not just about economic growth, it's not just about tax to the exchequer, it's actually also about social mobility. And if people get into business, they actually have an opportunity to make their way through the social strata as well as the economic strata.
And you think that's a more successful way, obviously, as people climbing up the
Far
ladder.
better.
What about the idea of allowing companies to run schools for profit? A good idea?
Yes, this has just come up, hasn't it? I'm not sure if it's a policy commitment at the moment.
But is it a good idea?
Well, I'm not sure. It depends on what the parameters are. But what I would say is if it would bring about better school standards, then of course it's a good idea. But at the moment, I think the jury's out on that.
What do you think, David Blunkett?
Well, there's no evidence that it does. Absolutely no evidence.
In Sweden, don't they run some of their schools for profit, and they are successful?
Well, they're not, actually. I mean, this is a great myth. We seem to think everything in Sweden...
Yes, it's true.
We seem to think everything in Sweden works really well and everything here works badly, and it's absolute bunkum. And I do know something about this, having been Education Secretary for 4 years, and innovative and in favour of radical reform and modernisation. And we can do that without people creaming off. It's what you do with it, by the way. I mean, when is profit reinvestment? When you just call it a surplus.
Yes.
You know, so there's all sorts of ways of cutting this cake rather than being ideological.
Thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you very much.
Now, if you were offered a £10,000 pay rise, what would you do? Say thanks very much and book a holiday? Or would you say this?
MPs of whatever description at the end of the day are public servants paid by taxpayers, and that's why I think it would be incredibly, if not impossible, to explain to the public why MPs should be treated at this time so very differently to their constituents.
Everyone remembers the MPs' expenses scandal. This independent body, IPSA, was set up afterwards so that MPs could have nothing to do with it at all. I do agree, though, and I think the public will agree, that the cost of politics in this country is too high.
When we're cutting public sector pay, when the private sector is coming under huge pressure, I mean, this is just barking mad. And if ever I need to be persuaded that IPSA was out of touch with reality, this is it.
Let's wait and see what the report says, and let's see how MPs react to it. It's not my job to tell them how to behave, but I think everybody will understand the wider context and the attitude of the public, which I think will be very hostile if the political class decides to put its own interests first.
Vince Cable ending that report, and joining us to discuss the public's reaction to a proposed £10,000 pay rise for MPs is the pollster Andrew Hawkins of ComRes. Before I come to you, Andrew Hawkins, David Blunkett, should MPs get £10,000 more?
Well, not immediately, certainly not. I mean, I'm in a much better position than most because I write and I speak and I can fund my office and the voluntary and charity stuff that I do. So I'm in a beneficial situation. I think the common sense view, in my opinion, would be to agree that for IPSA to put forward their proposal, although I think the timing's very bad.
But will the timing ever be right, though, David
to agree,
Blunkett?
well, it wouldn't, which is why I was just about to say...
Sorry.
It's all right. I was about to say, look, we can't possibly implement it now or in 2015 because there's a pay cap in terms of the public sector. But why not consider that in 2016, 2017, this should be phased in? If we don't, we'll continue to have this nonsense where people can hate us, they can despise us, they can believe we don't do a day's work. But actually, in comparison with the head of a school with 13 weeks holiday, or for that matter, in terms of those who are working in the civil service, it's a nonsense.
Right, well...
It's an absolute nonsense.
On that basis, Andrew Hawkins, should they be paid more now?
Well, it doesn't take the forecasting skills of Mystic Meg to see that this is going to be an explosive issue over the next few weeks. And we did a big study for IPSA in the middle of last year, asking the public what they felt about how much MPs were paid. And the range of knowledge about what MPs are paid is just colossal, ranging from under 20,000 right up to more than 150,000. The average is 88,000. That's what people think MPs are paid.
They're actually paid 66. Backbenchers are paid 66,000.
And when you ask them what they should be paid, that goes down to 55,000, unsurprisingly. Now, the significance of that is actually what IPSA is proposing is within the region of expectation for a lot of people. The problem is that the expenses scandal still looms very large in the public's consciousness.
But for years, there's never been a good time. I mean, I'm not here to defend whether MPs should get pay rise, but for years, there's never been a good time to pay MPs more. And some might have argued that was the reason that the expenses scandal, in part, came about.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it needs tackling somehow. But the question is, as other commentators have said, at a time when we're told we're supposed to be all in this together, is this the right moment to do it? Maybe there are better times.
Should it be compared, being an MP, or the job of an MP, should it be compared to a head teacher, a police constable, somebody in the civil service? Is that the sort of range that you would put the job of an MP together?
That's what the public expect the comparison to be. And when you line up MPs along some other public sector workers, their pay is broadly comparable. Now, as I say, I'm not here to defend the MP level, the pay levels of MPs, but when you look at their overall lifestyle, you do have to ask whether the pay is commensurate with the hassle of the job insecurity, getting booted out after 5 years. It's a tough job. The other issue is whether money actually does motivate the sort of people who go into politics.
Let's come on to that. Does money motivate, or will it be a disincentive, David Blunkett, in the next 5 to 10 years if the pay stays broadly the same?
Well, it isn't a motivator. A third of those who came in 2010 were earning 30,000 more than the current backbenchers' salary. Of course it isn't, and it never was all those years ago when I entered. What we need to do is to reward people sensibly, demand a great deal of them, expect them to be ethical, and then to hold them to account. And I have to say that if you've been a cabinet minister and then you drop back down onto a backbencher's salary, we shouldn't expect you to leave Parliament. We should expect you to be able to be there, bringing some experience and knowledge, and hopefully learning some of the lessons that you've learned over the years, rather than getting out. And at the moment, the system almost says, well, you've done your time, get out.